Jam Pro and a different type of triggering mode called Loop Stab. Let's strip it down so we can hear what we're doing. This is the stab matrix and this is the clip matrix to the left. They both hold samples, and the way that the samples are triggered by default is different between the two matrices, but you can configure the way that the samples are triggered. Let's look at the ways that you can do that. You can see that each of the stabs has got these two buttons here, one which can be gated or trigger and the other which can be loop or one shot. They control the behaviour of the clips when you trigger them from the matrix. If something's in gate, it means that will only play when you hold down the pad that's triggering it. The alternative to that is trigger. In that mode, when you touch a pad, it fires the clip off and it will continue playing even when you take your finger off. Normally, the loop matrix is set to play in trigger mode, and the stabs by default are set to play in gate mode, so a stab only plays whilst you hold its pad down and then stops when you release it. For example, with this stab, tap it once in trigger, and as we've turned it to one shot mode, when it gets to the end it stops. The clips in the loop matrix, in normal loop mode, they're forced to be in trigger and loop, so when you touch them they keep playing, when they get to the end they loop. If you keep touching them, you trigger the drillter effect. That's the normal loop matrix mode. Now you can put the whole channel into a different mode by holding shift down and tapping the channel mute button, and it then goes red, puts the whole channel, all the clips in it, into what we call loop stab mode. And you can see there that each clip will then have the same buttons as the stabs do, a button for gated or trigger and a button for loop or one shot. When they're in normal loop mode, those buttons aren't shown. That's because they're all in trigger and loop. So again, we see when they're in loop stab mode, you see those toggles for each clip, and you can set them individually. What this means is that we can now play all these loops in the loop matrix like stabs. I can play them all rhythmically, like an SP404. You've got a bunch of samples that you can trigger freely from the pads. Let's mess around with that a bit. Each time you trigger one of the clips, it plays from the start. And this mode means we can play the clips with any kind of rhythmic phase relationship to each other that we like, rather than all being slave to the clock in the same way. Now you might want a clip to actually continue playing when you let go of it, and you can use the shift key to toggle that gate trigger behaviour, leaving it effectively locked on when you let go. See, hold shift down, then release that clip, but it continues playing because it's changed to trigger mode. Now it's locked on. It continues playing even though I've taken my finger off. If I trigger again, it'll play from the beginning again and keep playing each time. Again, I might want to turn that off. Again, hold shift down, press the clip, it changes to gated, it continues playing. If I tap it one more time, I can stop it. This was the system we came up with to give you the most flexibility with the most control. This means also that you can change the timing or the phase, the relationship of these clips to each other. You see how in the first two channels, the clips each have their phase indicator, the line at the bottom that shows the progress, and they're all locked to the master clock. They're running off the same phase. But the synth channel, because it's in loop stab mode, the phase is separate, it's manually set. The phase indicator is not shown until you start playing it. Let's say we trigger it on the 3. 1, 2, 3. The phase indicator starts. Now we've locked it on using the shift. Now that clip is playing with a different offset with respect to the other clips on the master clock. Now what happens if I store that into a patch, I hear you say? Will it remember the offset? Yes, it should do. So let's call it off. Now when you save a patch, it always re-triggers it from the beginning of the bar, which could be a little bit annoying, but that's the way it works at the moment. So here you count along, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Let's trigger it from the beginning on the 3. If you look at this box where it says offset, this is the way that currently the app remembers what that offset is. If I tapped it, it'd clear it, because you do need a way to clear it, otherwise you'd be stuck with it. Possibly we should have a different way of resetting it, but currently that's the way it is. The way we remember those offsets relative to the master clock, so that we can have different offsets in different patches. So that's loop stab mode, where we can have the best of both worlds, where we can use shift to change that triggering mode, and also swap the channel back to normal channel loop mode. Let's have a bit of fun with these basses and synths. Your effects are all working. You've got your delay, reverb, distortion, your XY is also working. Channels that are in loop stab mode, the effects will work. Let's lock it on so we can hear what the cold cutter does. So that bass is locked on now. Cold cut's working, there's the reverse one. Super fills are working even on these offset clips. The only thing which doesn't work in the same way is the drillter, because in our normal channel mode, when we hold down a clip that's playing, it triggers the drillter. But in loop stab mode, hold down a clip that's already playing, it will re-trigger it. We haven't quite worked out how to have all the best of both worlds with all the cherry on the cake for all those modes. This is what we've come up with. So hopefully you'll find that quite a funky mode to play with. Pitch bends work. If you wanted to, for instance, you could record what you're doing, resample what you're doing in loop stab mode and make a whole new bass line, and then load that back into a slot using the resampling mode. There's a tutorial for that on the how-to playlist. Loop stab mode. You get the idea. Hopefully that'll keep you entertained.